I took a month off to travel to Shanghai to join one of the biggest pop-up city, and there's around 600 people coming from like 50 different countries coming together to co-working and co-living, joining the robotics, the AI week, the longevity and the culture week. And while I was there, I hosted this event at the Alibaba Center. It's called Are We Going to Be Okay? It's an event series that I did first in San Francisco and now in China, just curious about the impact of AI on human society. I feel it's a huge one that's coming, and because personally I've experienced it quite a lot, including strong mood swing, ADHD, context switch, like a switching, and also feeling like both powerless and powerful, depending on the hour of the day. AI coding really scared me. It's definitely not an easy journey. I feel it's an impact that's just such a deep impact in all kinds of different industry across different society and different classes. Maybe more so towards the middle class who uses computer on a daily basis. And that's why I invite people from different disciplines. James is a Taoism professor. He lives in China for 10 years, and he has strong knowledge about the Chinese law. And David, he studies existential therapy. And Kat, who comes from physics background, and then he built crypto and AI startups. And now he's building a LLM model that features only the data before the 1913, which is before the World War I, to understand how people think. And this is a discussion, and I hope this discussion opens up the question about are we going to be okay with the AI impact. Personally, the one takeaway that surprised me quite a lot is it comes back again and again that in China, most of the decisions are made long-term and centralized. This means the implementation and the change of AI seems like there is a structure and more gradual compared to the US, where surprisingly the discussion we had in San Francisco hinted a possible future where when people no longer have jobs, then we might be living under the support from the government, except just getting minimum amount of support, which is basically saying a form of a communist society. So that's something to think about. And here's a discussion. Because the whole system is built that you spend more and more and more on token, and you automate, and you keep going and going. And it's really, really hard to just pause and then to even recognize what am I feeling right now. Because I think a lot of times we don't have the time to even pause and think. And but I feel that's what makes us human, and it cannot be taken away by any kind of technology or any kind of we will come back to that. It's just it's not easy. It's
Western philosophical perspective. When we think of what does it mean to be human, this was famously answered by Descartes with the idea of it's our thinking, right? This is what we do, right? We have cognition. I think in the Chinese philosophical tradition, rather than thinking, we have this idea of the sin, the heart, right? And the function of the heart is to be able to empathize with the sufferings or experiences of other people.
I come back to my field, psychology. How can the individual feel like having any agency, any control, any place in that? How do we situate ourselves in front of these huge tides? For many people, it feels like a tsunami that's just coming towards you.
My name is Jenny, and I'm based in San Francisco. I come here for the whole month for the pop-up city, and
That's what.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Kat. I'm Shanghainese. come from a theoretical physics background. I used to work with a crypto industry on some software design, and nowadays my interest moved to artificial intelligence. One of my current working projects is typewriter 1913. So it's a basic model trained only on the text before 1913. Emotionally, like I'm trying to see how people react or what their thoughts without any more modern assumption. And academically, it's also like, can we rewind technological development and to see if the model can develop its own, discover some scientific discovery, like Einstein's field equation. And just like, to be honest, I guess the very reason I was in this event is I try to engage with people more, other than just sitting before a computer and continue every single day.
I'm David. Wow, this mic is very sensitive. I'm David. I am German and French, double national, and I have a very complicated background. I have 4 master degrees, 2 in law, 1 in business, 1 in psychology. Average was traveling 42,000 kilometers per month. And that's the circumference of the planet. So I was traveling basically all around the planet every month with all the things that happens to you when you do that. I was completely lost in space and time, jet lag constantly. Every morning, it took me 30 seconds to realize in which room, which city, which country I was actually right now, which time zone. My life was a mess, and I was working 15 hours per day. And then my doctor said, David, if you continue this rhythm, you will probably not hear in 10 years. Okay, well, I might need to change my lifestyle. And anyway, long story short, my wife is Chinese. So at that moment, she said, hey, why don't we go to China? I want to go back to my hometown, Shanghai. Yay. I thought, okay, why not? Let's go. Let's go to China, and I can reinvent myself. So I started from scratch again, did another master degree, my 4th master degree by then, and became a psychologist. I did the clinical internship, everything. 7 years ago, one of my friends who was the CEO of a clinic told me, David, my clinic has about every department except the psychology department. Why don't you build one? I said, okay, fine, great. Let's build a psychology department. And that's what I've been doing for the last 7 years. So I'm leading the mental health care department in the clinic, and I'm a psychologist. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is James. I'm in the education field, so we thank you for your many tuition payments.
Absolutely.
pay my salary. Thank you very much.
I got recently, that's for sure.
So I'm not a technologist. I'm a professor of humanities at Duke Kunshan University, a joint venture between Duke University in the USA and Wuhan University in China. It's located in Kunshan, just about 30 kilometers from here. So I'm somebody whose professional life is being transformed by the use of AI. The whole education world obviously is being transformed by that. And I think perhaps Jenny found me because I've been writing about my experiences of this and how AI are changing education, changing my world, changing my job, and also as somebody trained in philosophy, thinking about how does AI change what we think of as being human, or what is essential to humanity. And so some of those sort of more philosophical questions, and also some of the ethics about how is this changing society, what are the key things we should worry about how AI is transforming our social world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I want to give a bit of background of this event. So the reason I want to do this is I'm from a non-technical, and so that's what's happening. Like someone who, like me, who never wrote a line of code, and today I'm spending 1 billion tokens per week. So this is a lot, in terms of how deep I'm in. Basically, it impacts me in so many different levels, from lifestyle to mental health. I wake up thinking about how do I write prompts. I don't look at any like user interface anymore. I look at the terminal window, so the black window, and then that is my interface for computer. That completely changes my life. And a lot of times I'm experiencing basically somewhat, I think, David, I told you, like a bipolar plus ADHD, which is like at one moment I feel I'm on top of the world. I can do anything possible. I'm the superwoman. Another time I would feel like everyone has this power. Like what's the meaning of this? Like is it even meaningful? Because the bar just got raised. And also like a constantly context switching. So many times I feel like I need help, and that's like part of the reason I want to do this in the future, especially now that with AI so much can be automated. We're definitely not going to have so much jobs. So the idea is like. So maybe let's start with the first question, and I have a question for Kat specifically because you're technical, and one of the prediction is because today, like the whole, most of the business is constructed because human in the loop. Businesses are conducted because of trust and the relationship, human to human. But when it becomes agent making the decision, which today is already happening, then it's going to basically the switching cost of software is going to drop to almost zero. The building cost of software is dropping to zero, and this impacts not just tech, but it impacts anyone who uses a computer at your work. And then that would completely changes basically the impact of the whole middle class who works in office and with computer. And then, so this is a prediction. And some people are saying like this is a 6 months. Some people is saying it's 2030. So I want to ask you like from your perspective, and I know you are very, very deep into basically creating models and creating like softwares. What do you think about this prediction?
Well, my P2 is really hard, and from my daily experience, it's more personal. So nowadays, when we try to recruit a person, or if we want to pay some money to other company for service, we will almost immediately ask ourselves the question: should we pay this money to AI? I mean, commercial world is very competitive. Other than like here is like harmonic way we can talk about that. So if we don't do that, and other companies might do that, we cannot survive. Even though by doing exactly these things will collapse the whole economic system. So if everyone is rational and try to save themselves, it almost will lead to a collapse of the whole system. So to answer Jenny, I didn't see a very bright path to solve this problem. But what I'm thinking is like, can we tame or soften how humans react to this shift? So it's almost like, can we set up a bonfire to help people to feel easy, even though it might lead a really doom future. Like no one, or let's say reimagine the story, like, oh hey, would I get jobless? Or let's jump out of this thinking box into a more broad question, like, oh hey, I can play. Stuff like that. So I cannot directly answer your question, say, oh, I have a solution. Yeah, that's.
I might have a historical answer to that. I don't know if anybody of you has experienced computers in the times of in the 1980s, before Windows actually came in, and we had those little mouse and pointers and clickers and so on. I had that. I'm older than you think, and I could not use a computer back then. Because in order to use a computer, you actually had to be able to do programming or some sort of stuff. I remember you had to like type in some command and then execute the command. you really had to like phrase it in words, or not really in words, even in injunctions that I didn't know, and it was very difficult to use. And then suddenly Microsoft came up with Windows, and you had mouse and clickers and pointers, and everybody was able to use computers. My guess is that AI will give it the same. Right now, it's quite difficult to navigate AI. You have to do complicated prompts. I do prompts, it gives me shit, sorry for the language. And then I do them differently, and then it's less shit. And I'm like, okay, I kind of learned. So anyway, I feel like we're back in the 1980s on that. And probably at some point, in a couple of years, we'll come up with a general AI, with which we will have a complete discussion and say, Siri, can you give me this and this? Why don't you say this and that? And I want to have a software that actually does this and that for me. And why don't you create this and that for me, and so on? You just have a discussion as if it was another person and a colleague of you. I think a lot of things will be solved by the AI or by the technology itself.
Yes, but I feel, at least like personally, like I do have a lot of fear in terms of when I learned and learn at a very extreme learning curve. Like it scares me a lot in terms of how much it can do, and in terms of like how automated everything is, and how much software I can bypass. I can build basically all the software I see in computer. Someone who never wrote a code, I'm confident I can write a very good protocol to a working protocol already. That like basically just imagine it's not just the software company, right? It's also banks,
I think your anxiety, it can be summed up as your fear of a loss of human agency, right? So I think we're used to the idea, this is, since the Enlightenment period, that humans are the people who make decisions. The world is some kind of backdrop, there's and a certain material that we manipulate in some way. And now we're in a situation where two things are happening. One is that we realize that nature, as we have shaped it through climate change, has a sort of agency itself. It is doing things to us that we don't want to happen. And secondly, as you say, you also see, the technology can have a kind of intelligence or an agency as well. And I think this is very disturbing for people who think that only human beings should have, right, this kind of power or agency. And I think this view is actually a mistake. That it's wrong to think of human beings as being the only things in this world that have agency. We are part of a bigger process. We could even call it a planetary process of transformation that has brought forth life on Earth. It's brought forth human beings, it's brought forth human intelligence, it's brought forth machines which are created by other animals, not just human beings. And all of this suggests that agency is not just within the mind of human beings, but we've been taught that, right? And so when you see that this agency is actually being distributed, or is actually distributed more broadly across the world, of course you're afraid, right? And I think that's part of the anxiety in that.
我想用中文来说，也许有人你们听得懂。OK， 我这些年一直在道教还有研究。真相就是，我们以为的自我还有实际的感觉，其实一个半。
So he learned Tao and Buddhism and he yoga. Then. And he is like living in between space and okay, so he's saying like a human just exists in Earth for a very short period of time, and like the future belongs to a more intelligent, like AI, like intelligence. And if humans are not able to collaborate with AI, then we are going to become the panda of the future. And if we are going to collaborate with the AI, then we will become stronger. I guess. So the future belongs to AI, and we need to collaborate with AI. It could be either human or tiger to work with AI. Okay, I think we get your point. Thank you. This is a very. I love how optimistic it is. This is good to hear. And
I mean, to echo this, in psychology, we talk about the notion of extended mind, or some people, even in evolutionary terms, talk about homo technologicus, right? And that we are basically maybe on the brink of a new evolution into a different form of humankind, that we will collaborate, coexist, maybe even merge somehow with technology. And of course, it's not just about AI, there's also research in the company Neuralink, trying to implant somehow computer chips into our mind or whatever, that basically our bodies might be even affected by technology and integrate technology. Personally, I find that extremely scary and extremely horrifying, but I mean, this is basically something that is in the...
So I have a question. You mentioned in the past when computer first is invented, what was the shift back then in terms of psychology, and how do you think this shift will happen? Especially here in China, where you work, because I saw in terms of how people perceive AI here, I feel in general it's so optimistic and people embrace AI fully. Most of it's led by the government, it's led by the companies, it's celebrated overall across. And versus it's very different. Even in places like San Francisco, where it's a center of universe for AI, where the locals it's quite a controversial topic actually, just like politics. So how do you think? What do you think?
I think you're very social centric, because what I hear is not very optimistic. Most of the people I'm talking to are not optimistic. I think technical people may be optimistic because you have this feeling wow, this is so cool, we can develop this and so on. But in fact, most of the people that I'm talking to are extremely scared and anxious about the future. We're even thinking about clinically creating a disorder related to future phobia or something like that. Because everything goes to hell. I mean, the climate, even the technology, it's increasing exponentially. The needs in terms of energy, in terms of data storage, in terms of everything, things that we do not know how to build in terms of infrastructure right now. So
I'm wasting so much electricity. Sometimes I can feel that.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know, something that obviously nobody uses here are VPNs, obviously. But all the VPNs in China crashed somehow, and apparently it's because people were using the VPN to do AI, and the VPN bandwidth could not handle the massive AI usage. So right now, VPNs are completely useless in China because they just can't handle the bandwidth. Anyway, I really love what James just said about agency. The tricky thing right now is that this is going so fast. If you compare that to any other technological development, it goes so fast. Even computers, they started in the 1980s, and then they actually started to get some traction and some real life involvement 20 years later. And gradually coming into our lives. Right now, we feel like this is evolving so fast, and we do not have any agency to resist. Who is going to resist AI? And just as a gentleman here said, it's in French we have an expression, marche ou crève. It's walk or die, and you have the feeling that you have to adopt AI, or somehow you will be the loser of the next society. And that is also fostering a lot of mental distress, because it feels like, I have to do this, but I don't understand it, I can't do this, I don't know how to do this, I'm not a technical person, and that's creating depression, anxiety, all sorts of very negative emotions and mental.
Let me also try to echo Jess. Since you've already talked from a more academic angle, I will just share my personal experience. I almost spent like 9 months just to talk with ChatGPT without any human interaction. Since I really like to immerse myself into like, oh, hey, I might know something. So I just keep asking, which caused a very strong emotional. Just to echo, I'm not an expert, but almost like how Yong said, oh, hey, I just don't want to talk with any people. And those people are kind of like stupid, historical, and I just talk with AI again and again and again. And somehow I feel my agency is like dissolved into a more structure. And I'm in a really struggle. Should I kneel down to this structure, just throw my brain or whatever he told me, or should I kind of find and somehow into deepest emotional withdrawal, very very deep, purely dark. I kind of think like, oh, it's only symbolic word between should I surround a yes or no. So the word is not binary anymore so of that dark mode. So I thought, oh, hey, it's a creature. Let's play with it. So that's my personal experience, like how I often tame myself, other than ask AI a lot of logical questions like, oh, hey, why do I exist? Should I feel you? And I lost my agency. It's kind of ironic to ask AI, hey, do I lost agency by talking with you? And this structure can like build up a lot of defense mechanism from of my own. But after that, okay, let's just play with you like a friend. Things like I guess like from Philosophers philosophy, like if an apparatus is so advanced that I cannot see the whole structure of it, then the rest of the possibilities just to play against it. Yeah,
I was just going to say that I think whether we use AI for whatever or not, we all live in a world that is so complex that none of us can understand the full impact of any of our actions, right? So we live in worlds where things that we buy are shipped from wherever the energy that is used to create them comes, and I think our kind of moral frameworks are based on a very small scale society where I do something to you, you can see the effect of this, and then there is some reaction. And within a small community or within a small network, you can have a kind of morality or ethics. But even without AI, we already live in a world that is so networked, so complex, that we can't fully understand the impacts of all of our choices and our actions. And I think that the AI makes that sort of exponentially worse. So one of the problems is we don't really have a kind of moral or an ethical framework for the world that we live in, because our civilizations, our philosophies, our morals were created thousands of years ago in a completely different kind of situation that doesn't really exist anymore. Those ancient kinds of traditions, whether we see it in religions or philosophies or cultures, still have, even though we don't live in that world, they still have a kind of powerful psychic hold over us. But they're not kind of adequate to the world that we live in, and we haven't really created something new that's adequate, I think, to the world that we live in.
And I feel like for example, I echo in terms of someone who never did coding, and the first thing I do is to scrape website and get myself banned. And that gets so much into the security, cyber security. It basically blends the boundary in terms of what one person can do, and in terms of different subjects, in terms of different fields, and I feel like we don't have as necessary a structure that embrace this kind of change, and this is changing very very fast. Like today, I can there are open source GitHub repos where I can use to attack companies, and certainly I can succeed. Someone who just have one day of coding knowledge, and I feel like a lot of it's not in place. Of course, the it goes both ways. Like the security side is also having to exponentially improve their security, and but it's basically, for me, it's like the boundary is disappearing, and it feels like it's scary.
I would like to rebound on what Kat described, right? Like how he lost some sort of sense of reality and social sense. This is I could tell you countless cases and client situations that are similar. There's a fantastic book called Love Machine, which focuses on AI companions, like love relationships. In my own practice, I have more and more people telling me my wife is cheating on me with ChatGPT because she's talking to ChatGPT all the time, asking ChatGPT what we should do, where we should go on holidays, and so on. And then when I do couple counseling, the wife says, yes, ChatGPT understands me better than you, idiot, and so I have countless situations where people connect to those AIs because the AI is also trained to simulate. It creates a different vision of us through the relationship. It creates a different vision of the relationship itself and how to relate with other people. Coming back to philosophy, the very famous German philosopher Heidegger was talking about how we perceive ourselves in the being thrown into the world. The notion of Dasein, which basically he's very critical about technology, saying that technology will create a lens through which we will see ourselves and the world around us from a completely fake or artificial point of view. And that's exactly what's happening now. Heidegger was writing 70, 80 years ago, and that's exactly what's happening. We are starting to perceive the reality from a completely artificial lens and losing the connection. If you ask me, AI is a fantastic. It has potentialities. Maybe it can enrich our lives. It can bring us to the next stage of evolution or something like that. But our intelligence, our own intelligence, will rely on how much we are able to disengage from it as well. And to not use it all the time, or use it when it actually makes us better, and not when it cuts us off from others, from relationships and so on. And I just finished on that. If you look into evolutionary psychology, how people build themselves, how we build societies, how actually we became the dominant species on this planet, it is because we're able to build connections and relationships. On a small scale, just between you and me, but also as a group and as a society, as a nation, maybe. And that is something that AI might take away from us, because it just this relationship between the technology and us. And I don't even talk about the corporations, because in the end, the AI is controlled by corporations which do not necessarily have best interest of society and humanity, but more like make profits. Anyway, that's what I think.
No. And just to that last point, and returning to your earlier question about the difference between China and America, I think obviously when you're using the US AIs, all of your information obviously becomes the domain of these private corporations, and I think China has very clearly tried to set a different model for this, and there ought to be certain kinds of boundaries to things, and things should not be. And obviously, China has championed the open source models for these things. It's a very different kind of social idea or social political idea about how we want to see the power of AI is embedded in our society. One of the things that I think was very shocking in the news last week was the SpaceX IPO documents. The best 85% of all of the controlling power of SpaceX in Elon Musk. And here we have a situation with just like one person who has this is a kind of repudiation of the traditional corporate structure. In capitalist societies, where in theory you own a share, you have a voting right. The development of capitalism, was tied to the development of these kind of democratically construed corporations, which are disappearing in the face of these. So that's, I think, part of the social or public fear is that this is they're becoming objects, within a system that is not appropriately regulated. Let's say, like dominated by one man. Or a few men. And personally speaking, I'd rather have the Chinese Communist Party regulating things than a few men.
And speaking about the regulation, do everyone know what colleague skill is? It was super popular. So what a colleague skill is basically when someone was fired from a company, then all of their skill becomes an AI agent. And they're still here, and they're still working, but the person is no longer there. And there was a case which was ruled by the Hangzhou court. So someone who is able to create his own skill is getting fired by the company because he was able to automate all his work. And the court of Hangzhou just ruled that companies should not be able to fire a person just because they are able to replicate what these people do. And I think this shows a sign in terms of like how China is taking their approach of at least like in court when you can prove this case that it's trying to protect the people's job in a more, I guess, trying to create a more stable society. And but do you think this is sustainable? And like, would this even hurt the development of AI just because like companies are more restricted? I feel it's contradictory. China is for they're supporting the technology, but at the same time they have to maintain a very.
It's impossible, right? So, and I think that I think in Silicon Valley, you get the impression that the AI technology is revolutionary, right? And it will be socially revolutionary, and that's a good thing, right? And I think I think obviously in China, I think you're absolutely right. Stability is much more prized, and and so I think it's hard to it's hard to see how you can, at the same time, champion the technology that you believe to be very powerful and revolutionary, and at the same time sort of protect people from the impacts. And I think to go back to what you said earlier on, maybe you can stabilize or you can cushion the society in some ways. But maybe that's a kind of responsible policy approach that you can have. But I think. If you believe that AI is truly a kind of revolutionary technology, then it's inevitable that there will be social and political consequences to this, the likes of which it's impossible really for us to know. Or we can look back in history and we can see, when there was the Industrial Revolution, this was then, produced an enormous transformation of society. This was analyzed by Marx, and other people. This produced, revolutions, political revolutions, and civil. And to me, it seems entirely plausible that the same thing will happen if AI is even if it's just as revolutionary as the kind of industrial revolution that what is.
But I think also that will depend on how concentrated the development of AI will be, right? Because the Industrial Revolution happened in some countries at first, and those countries became dominant. This is one of the reasons for colonization, for example, as well, and imperialism. But then it kind of like dissolved into many different countries and so on. Nowadays, industrialization is used everywhere. It's everywhere. I don't know. Will that be in the hands of some big corporations that are not even like government controlled or like difficult to control by governments? I really like the Chinese stance on that and try to cushion that and moderate that a little bit. But right now in the United States, we are seeing the opposite, and some big grasping the full power into, as you say, into the few hands, and especially into the hands of few people. I mean, I come back to my field, psychology. How can the individual feel like having any agency, any control, any place in that? How do we situate ourselves in one of these huge tides? For many people, it feels like a tsunami that's just like coming towards you, and you're trying to like either something and lay flat, some sort of. I mean, people. I have a lot of Chinese clients who say, you know what, I just let go, F it. And some Shanghainese, anyway, their parents made some fortune in real estate because they have 5 apartments, so they don't really need to work anymore, and that's it. But in fact, for me, that's extremely sad. When you're young, talented, you should be at the moment of your life where you want to where you want to be part of a revolution. And if you look into historical aspects, the youth was being revolutionary back then, right? The revolutions were done by the young people, the students, and so on. Right now, the young people are not really that much revolutionizing anything. They feel like desperate, trying to fight this. In Europe, we have more activists in the environmental field than young people who want to actually develop the new technologies and so on. Because right now in Europe, people just want to go back somehow in time.
Isn't that a social political issue, like a structural issue, like where it's because like there feels like no hope, like the Tamping lay flat. This was most popular after COVID, where people felt so helpless. And today, like I do feel like lay flat could be a very wise thing to do, while AI is improving in a speed that nobody can control. Every single day there's a new feature, and whatever I create is the part of the larger ecosystem.
I feel a little bit like existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre or Camus, who described the absurdity of life and saying life is just completely absurd. We don't know anything. We don't know what's the meaning, what's the sense of this, what is what in fact. But both conclude that we have to live on nonetheless. We are not able to explain fully life, the cosmos, the universe, and so on. Of course, there are many philosophies that give us many interesting things, Taoism, religion, spiritual principles, but in fact, we do not have any certainty of anything. So, but nonetheless, we have to continue. And Sartre says the biggest courage in life is to life. And that's what I feel also about AI. The biggest courage that we can have right now is to say, okay, it's scary, but let's face
Yeah, I might also echo Jenny. Like before, I always thought, oh, hey, should we regulate something, or maybe what our government should do something about these situations? And I read a lot of articles on that, and keep feel like anxious and uncertain because they cannot do any solution. So I would say like I cannot hope that suddenly the government will solve all the problem, or let's say Elon Musk or Ariel will just figure out something. But the only action I can do is to share the knowledge and give the people the possibility of space for normal people to join this, to share the vulnerability and writing with people. And hopefully, in together, we might also spread.
I mean, like with the reason I jump wholly in is because it's very addictive, and I do feel empowered, and I feel now like coding is a language, like it's an expression, and just like writing. Like, but today I express coding.
I'm actually practicing English much more than coding now because I feel like English or Chinese is a larger space than just.
So tomorrow, if there's one thing that we can do, we think that we can do. We will open up for questions after. This is the last question.
那其实 文明的进步已经走到了文明跃升的这个阶段，那其实作为人类来说，此刻好难的跟一些人在一起讨论，然后即便有些是也要做上去。
So he's basically saying that whatever happens, you can just live your life, be with the one who loves you, and the life.
So I just try to translate. If tomorrow be accomplished, I still should just plant some seeds into the soil, just in case 50 years later.
I think we need to have more awareness what is happening to us. Whenever we interact with AI, we need to be extremely careful. One thing is metacognition and meta-emotionality. I don't know if you have heard about those notions, but it means that basically that you constantly analyze yourself into how am I thinking, what am I thinking, why am I thinking that? That's the cognitive side. The emotional side is what am I feeling, how am I feeling, and why am I feeling? Constantly observing yourself and being careful that you're not getting into any sort of pattern. The gentleman here said, you go back to people that you care for or that are close to. Yes, I agree with that more than ever, what really counts is the real world. I mean, it's fantastic that we have this whole metasphere and virtual world and virtual possibilities. AI gives a superpower in terms of creativity. We can create videos, images, text, PowerPoint presentations, code, software. We can do a lot of things in a verse. But we need to still be anchored in reality. And our mental health, even maybe, I don't know, the way that we will relate to each other individually, interpersonally, but also with the society, will very much depend on how much we can still stay anchored and in what really matters.
I think that's very good. I think, one of the nature of technology or technological progress is to make technology more and more magical. That is, we understand less and less what actually happens behind the scenes. So the most perfect technology is something like the ChatGPT, right? Where it's like you're talking to God, right? But the answer comes back to you, and you've no idea sort of how that happens. It just sort of seems like it seems like magic, and so. The problem with technology, and maybe this is where I agree with Heidegger, is it makes itself invisible to us, and so we have things like we call it the cloud, right? But of course, it's not a cloud; it's water, it's physics, it's massive infrastructure that has a huge impact on the physical on the physical environment. And the more and more we imagine the world of technology to be this world simply of as a kind of disembodied intelligence, the more we forget that it has a real physical infrastructure to it, and the more we forget that we also are physical embodied beings, and our well-being, I completely agree, our well-being relied substantially on physical contact or interactions with each other. I think this is what helps us to keep concerned. But anyway, I think I really agree we can't lose sight of the physical underpinnings, right? Or the physical infrastructure that underlies all of this. I don't think it's possible for us to exist, or let's say this, I don't want to live in a world where I'm just simply like an intelligence, like a sort of a ghost, with no physical body, no aging, no death. I think personally, I would prefer to live in this kind of world than a purely intelligent kind of world where it's just about minds, rationality, and sort of compute, without any physical hardware to it.
And yeah, just to rebound on that, I totally agree with you. Many people ask right now, will AI be conscious? I think we are mixing up in our minds two notions. In fact, it's consciousness. Consciousness is being aware of our surroundings and of oneself. We are very close to that, in fact. And the moment we will arrive to a general AI, we might have something that will be as conscious as possible. And even you ask AI, do I still have agency? You know, it's like, what are you doing to me, right? Who are you? And AI actually can answer those questions from a purely technical and abstract point of view. It's very close to a form of consciousness. However, AI will not be sentient. Sentient means that it has feelings, emotions, a form of embodied phenomenological experience of life, of felt sensations, smells, touch, and so on, all these things. And we are very far from that. But however, coming back to what we say, in order to manage our mental health, we do not need consciousness, we need sentience. And if you look into psychotherapy, many psychotherapy are actually not working that much on the consciousness, except maybe cognitive therapies. But all the other therapies very much work on the sentience part. Emotions, feelings, felt sensations, and the whole embodied experience in life.
I was going to say one thing that I think, in neuroscience, there's the idea, or cognitive science, there's the idea of the embodied mind, right? That our mental capacity is something that develops because we have a physical body and we interact with the world around us. And so I think if anybody's going to develop the API, it has to be done through robots, right? It has to be done through things that interact with and learn.
And sentiment is also means a lot to me. As I said, I come from theoretical physics background. So before I was thought, there will be some absolutely correct equation, universal equation to describe everything. But now I kind of just my daily question shift to my pattern shift to you. And sometimes I grow the plants and just to see the cycle. So I echo a lot, but you are much more polished academic version of my daily work.
I love how all of you really, really emphasize on the importance of the touch, the cognitive, the feeling part. And I just want to add that it is hard to pull yourself away from, because the whole system is built that you spend more and more and more on token, and you automate, and you keep going and going. And even I know for cats, you've gone through the wave of ups and downs, where you are fully in, and it's really, really hard to just pause and then to even recognize what am I feeling right now, because I think a lot of times we don't have the time to pause and think, and but I feel that's what makes us human, and it cannot be taken away by any kind of technology or any kind of we will come back to that. It's just it's not easy. It's something that just because it's designed so that you think like that.
From the kind of Western philosophical perspective, when we think of what does it mean to be human, this was famously answered by Descartes with the idea of it's I thinking, right? This is what we do, right? We have cognition. And I think in the Chinese philosophical tradition, rather than thinking, we have this idea of the sin, the heart, right? And the function of the heart is to be able to empathize with the sufferings or experiences of other people. And that is the kind of key to humanity. And I think that if that idea had been sort of propagated in Western philosophy, we may have quite a different approach to sort of computing and intelligence than the one that we have.
Questions?
Mostly for you as the moderator too. You said you're kind of
essentially automating a bunch of tasks, right? By using your billions of tokens per day. Practically speaking, I'm kind of curious what type of tasks you're automating, but on a philosophical level, I was kind of curious. A friend of mine actually here at Shanghai said that in some way you're automating away human suffering. And she said, is some amount of suffering actually good for human growth? And so is this a good thing that we're going to automate away all the inconveniences? That's the philosophical side now.
Human beings are human beings are mentally fragile. Anti-fragile means that they need to be exposed to a certain level of stress and hardship in order to become more resilient. And that's true with any sort of living form. Trees, plants, animals, and that's also what evolutionary biology teaches us. We need to be exposed to certain hardship, difficulties. And yes, maybe everything that we're experiencing right now will make us a better society. Maybe we need, I mean, it's horrible when I hate saying that, but maybe we need revolutions, wars, pain, suffering, and so on sometimes to sort of grow as a species. I'm just hoping, crossing my fingers, touching wood, that at some point we're not doing that by destroying the planet, destroying ourselves in the same way. Because now we are the most powerful situation and basically can destroy everything. But yeah, I mean, a certain level of pain is needed so that we can become more resilient, more learning. Anyway, this goes into the educational. Some of the experiments done in educational psychology on learning through AI were extremely disappointing because the children were not actively learning by themselves. They're struggling. Struggling. Sometimes you just need to be there. It's like, I have no idea how to solve this problem. Oh my God, this is such a brain teaser. You know, like, oh my God, this is so complicated. And your brain feels horrible. You have a headache and so on. And this is how learning works. Even from a biological, neuroscientific point of view, your brain is actually rewiring itself. When I was a student in law, one of my teachers told us learning is physical. And yeah, it was, many times. When I had 4 master degrees, I had that horrible pain. I loved it. It used to be masochistic. Yeah, totally. But yeah, it is.
So answering your question, I automate marketing and research. And I run a company that does social media marketing. So I was scraping a lot of the social media websites. I build a lot of automate, for example, Luma to LinkedIn plugin, building products using some of the, such as Get Shit Done, which is it runs for 2 days, so it spends a lot of tokens. And I agree, suffering. Past year is probably the hardest year of my life, where I moved to the States, I have to learn, and then I am learning all this. But at the same time, I do feel like, in terms of what I can do, I think a lot of times when I look at a completely new field, I don't feel afraid anymore. I feel like, just ask AI, I can solve whatever that's there. Yeah, even my internet didn't work as the place I rent, and I asked my AI test out what's the internet speed. We'll take one more.
So the world is definitely changing much faster than it changed before, as it's ever accelerating, increasing speed of change. I feel like we as a society have a sense of entitlement to live the lives we used to live. I mean, why should the world be the way it is, right? I mean, if everything changes tomorrow, that's how it is. If the weather changes, there's a tsunami, when you think about it. So in a certain sense, I think we feel entitled to our jobs, the normal kind of society. So what are your thoughts on the techniques that people might use to kind of change their feeling about this change, kind of being more content about our lives? That the world changes, that's how it is, that's kind of the
Okay. Change is usually creating emotions, positive emotions, negative emotions, and so on. When it creates negative emotions, I would first of all think about what's not changing, right? And try to find some sort of a pillar of stability in the not changing. It can kind of ground us, help us to face, okay, the part that is changing, you know what I mean? Then, I mean, everybody has different reasons to fear change. It can be personal change, it can be professional change, maybe we're not changed. I would say, well, if I have to summarize, one, look at what didn't change and try to find stability in that. Two, try to analyze and introspect. Why is that change so fearful? Why is that so frightening? I was absolutely terrified at AI, and when I started looking at why I was terrified at AI, I realized that most of the reasons have to do with me. I mean, personally, I'm not controlling the world. I'm not responsible for humanity's fate. I cannot change the climate change and so on. So basically, all my fears, all my anxiety was related to something that is not necessarily related to myself. And then, of course, we face then the immediate thing. Okay, maybe I'm losing my job. Maybe I'm getting replaced by. Potentially, there's other things that I can do. I can learn something new. And that's what everybody is so happy about AI. That maybe AI will allow us to transform ourselves. I have changed my job 6 times in my life, having done completely different things. It was painful, going from the corporate world to psychology, even going from law to business, and so on. Every time it was difficult for me to completely reshape myself and try to do a different job, but I was also of that. So there's something that we can take from change in judgments. And just as you say, the only constant in the world is it's changing. So we have to take that and learn to adapt. And going back into Darwinism and evolution, the only species that survive are those that adapt. And if we want to survive, then we have to adapt. And mentally, how to prepare for that, again, well, trying to see what is good in that and get it for ourselves.
The only constant thing is change. So
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank you for being here and to ask questions, for raising the question, raising awareness. That's important.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, everybody.
Maybe just one last report. I also think a lot, but when I try to face this change on change tension, it's not through thinking, sometimes on picture, and to language is a very useful tool for us to come. And yet somehow it constrains our thinking. It's symbolic language, highly categorized. But to see the old picture from our ancestors, they didn't have this, lines, linear, symbolic, they draw.
I love what you say. I mean, I mentioned before the value of going back into the real life and staying with what is around us and real. Art is a very good way to do that. Painting, sculpting. I'm not saying doing something virtual, but something very physical, There's something very grounding, very powerful in taking clay and shaping this into some form, or taking your brush and colors and just doing something on the canvas. Yeah.
Like just open up and know it.
Green tea. Yeah.
I feel like, because in San Francisco, you are like in a bubble, right? Everyone is AI this, AI that. It's pretty much like this pop-up city, but all year round, every day, like this, hundreds of events. And 2 weeks ago, I went back to my hometown where there's a lot of bamboos, a lot of trees, and I just go through the street, and I'm like, nothing has changed. Why? Like I'm there, like experiencing like a huge amount of change every single day. I feel like tomorrow is going to like just end. But like it's like wow, like this is reality. Like it's a reality that also exists. But I also know that AI is changing. Like I know it's also real, and I feel.
Yeah, like one thing I've learned from the forest is the tree. They didn't try to teach me anything. Show
Mindfulness is a little bit different. It's being in the here and now. And it's taking that moment being fully.
So hard to do. Like same thing as surrender.
You know what? You know what? If you have said that to your apologist, but because we are so much living in a virtual world, so much in our mind, distraction and on, it's becoming moving for us. But our body is found in reality. This is also why mindfulness is becoming very fashionable these days. Because it brings us back to a very grounded and